Dave, really excited to have you on the program today.
Holy cow, buddy. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Hey, let's dive right in. Tell us about yourself and your business and what brings you today.
Well, what brings me today is trying to help anybody that's listening that might be stuck. And, as a business coach, as your entrepreneur coach, as you know, we tend to come alongside people that are stuck. And so hopefully something we say today will resonate with somebody. And I always encourage, if that resonation happens, that you actually do something with it. So hopefully we'll scratch somebody's itch today and be able to, give them some good opportunities to move forward. So looking forward to it.
Awesome. Tell me, why did you want to become an entrepreneur? Why did you decide to launch a business and get in?
It's interesting as thinking about that question. I don't know if I necessarily, number one, I don't know what the word means. If I don't know how to spell it, then I don't know how to use it. So, I owned a business for most of my life. That's how I look at myself, whether entrepreneur was there or not. I'm kind of probably foggy on what that actually means. I just know that I wanted to be in charge of my own destiny, so to speak. And working for the man, we'll call it, really didn't work. I started in the mid 80s, and by the early 90s I was owning my own business. And that's, and again, it wasn't that they were doing a bad job. I just had this calling in my life to be able to do that, on my own. So that's what I followed, and been doing it ever since.
Yeah, walk us through that journey a little bit because you've had multiple runs at the business venture. So walk us through, like, how did you decide that, like, this is what I want? You mentioned you wanted to control your own destiny, and
Yeah.
that's a big feature for a lot of folks. But take us through that journey a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So mid 80s, I joined a company and selling construction products. And by the early 90s, I wanted to venture off into a different area within that same, world. So I had a business partner at the time, and we started going down that road. And when I started in 1991, we had literally $0 in this division. There were no sales coming in, and it was just me. And then when I sold it in 2012, we ended up with about 10 million in annual sales and had 22 people on the team. So, it was definitely a work in progress. And every podcast that I'm on and every podcast guest that I have, I try and ask, what's the secret, magic bullet? And I've yet to find one, so maybe Brent's got one today. It'd be awesome if we did, but nothing replaces hard work, and nothing replaces planning, and nothing really, replaces being in the right place at the right time. So, but a lot of people in today's world, they don't really want to work for it, I guess I found. And if you're not willing to put in the hours and to have the stress, then probably good to stay in corporate America. And not that that's good or bad. There's no right or wrong to these. I just think that each person has their own preference, and my preference was to work for myself.
So you mentioned, you were willing to start a division that was literally starting from zero. Was it
Yes.
passion? Did you find a problem that you felt like, boy, this really needs to be addressed? What drew you to that category?
Yeah, I'm my personality. I do a lot of work with disc behavioral tools. And so, my personality was, number one, I get bored easy. Number two, I'm always looking for the next latest and greatest. I have those, that are ingrained in my personality. So I don't, I wake up thinking, what can I do different today? So some people have that, some people don't. And I don't think these are right or wrong, but I just had this thought that I could do it better. and we constantly evolved and we constantly created, and we actually started doing things that weren't done in our industry, and we, perfected it. We started it, we revolutionized an industry, and now, the vast majority of the industry that we were in, they're doing it that way. So, that was cool to have that start. So, it just comes natural for some people, and some things just came natural to me. And I just really wanted to make sure that I used that God-given talent that I had.
Well, I love the fact you embraced the way you were created, and knew that that was a flow that you had to be able to follow. I think, if there's a lesson, I don't know if it's the silver bullet or not, but I would say if there's a lesson out there. Hey, look, if you're feeling those pulls, those you feel like this is what should be,
Yep.
follow that leading. How you're created really matters. So, um,
Yeah, and that's why I use an assessment, and again, I don't really care what assessment you use, but make sure that you really are aware of yourself, and you're aware of your strengths, and you're aware of the things that you're not as strong as, because you have a strength. Everybody listening here has a strength, whatever it is, and we're so busy today in our world that we rarely stop long enough to really think about what it is that we're really good at. And I think about where my parents were told me, don't just stand there, do something. I mean, that was what I was raised with. And now that I'm getting older, I'm like, don't just do something, stand there. And so it's kind of actually reversed itself. And so I stand there and say, okay, what am I really good at? What am I passionate about? What are a couple of those things? And then you take those pieces, and then you start to, dwell on them, pray on them, if that's what you're into. And then you start to really be able to formulate some solid next steps. I mean, we all know it doesn't go from a thought to 10 million in annual sales. I mean, there was a long process for us.
yeah, were you able? Can you walk us through a little bit? You created not only a new category, but a new process and a new way of doing business that's been adopted broadly. So how did you, just a few steps, how did you go through kind of identifying where the gap was, and maybe getting the creativity to find a good solution to that problem?
Yeah. So for us specifically, our product that we were involved with was a product that we would sell but not install. And so we were identifying that there were a lot of problems with this particular product. So the simple solution was, well, why don't we just install it? Seemed really simple at the time. Obviously, there's a ton to it. There were a bunch of logistics, but we were trying to fix a problem. And in fixing that problem, Brent, we were able to not only fix it, but we were able to be successful and make money while we were fixing it. So it was a two-pronged approach. Number one, we reduced the amount of problems we had with it, and we made money along the way. And so it was really a win-win. And the customer, to wrap a bow on it, the customer really loved having, it professionally installed rather than something that was installed by, somebody that wasn't a professional. So it hit success. And then once that happened, a bunch of people got, excited about it. We actually had people come to us and say, well, we don't buy these products from you, but would you install these products that we buy from somebody else? Because we heard so many great things about it, which is a huge honor. But at the end of the day, we're like, yeah, no, this is really reserved for our customers. And so it really set us apart. And I think if you're listening and you're an entrepreneur, business owner, and you can't come up with some real solid reasons why you are that good and nobody else is doing what you're doing. I mean, I always talk about Midwest Express, which was a fantastic airline, in the Midwest, owned by Kimberly Clark back in the day. And, you'd be sitting there and they had the best, food. They had such a great experience and they knew why they were the best. And probably about 20 minutes before landing, you'd be sitting there minding your own business. And all of a sudden boy, I smell something. It smells like a chocolate chip cookie, and sure enough, they're making chocolate chip cookies on the flight. So you get 2 chocolate chip cookies for landing. And so I always ask my clients and people that I talk to, what's your cookie? What are you doing that nobody else is doing? And if you can't identify two things, three things, one thing, if you can't identify something, you're going to have a really hard time identifying that in front of a prospect when a prospect says, why should I buy from you? Why are you better than my current vendor, my current supplier? So, that's definitely something that you need to invest some time in, is to find out what your cookie is.
I like that phrase. What's your cookie? It rolls off the tongue much like the value proposition, and it probably tastes
Yeah,
good too. So that's
exactly. Now I'm hungry, man. We shouldn't have said that. I'm
I know,
sorry.
I know. Well, we'll have to wrap this one early and go get some cookies. Uh,
Exactly.
Fast forward, so 2012, you
Yeah.
successfully sell the business. Kudos
Yep.
on that, by the way.
Thank
And
you.
then tell us about positive polarity. What was the item there that you felt like, man, I got to dive into this space because I get some people that can help.
Yeah, for sure. So you have to kind of go back to 2008. And interestingly enough, everybody that was in business remembers where they were. This was like a JFK thing, a 9/11 thing, and then 2008 when business just stopped. For us, building permits went down almost 90%. You can just envision the spigot. There's no more water coming out. So, at the time we had 17 people on our team, and we were cruising along and life was good. And so we could have easily have just closed down. And I thought to myself, the kind of the thought I had was, if you're able to keep your customers in business, they will then in turn keep you in business. So our customer was home builders, remodelers, architects, just more in the construction industry, which they were all really good at building a solid house. They were really great at their craft, whatever their craft was, but they struggled with some things, how to grow a business, how to sell, how to market. There are different things that they really struggled with. So in 2008, we started to offer these weekly trainings for these people. And again, think, if I can keep them in business, they'll keep me in business. So fast forward that tape 4 years, 2012, we get through that debacle. We actually we grew our business by 47% in that time. We had went from 17 people to 22 people. And I realized that I had such a huge passion to train and to educate. And so that's where I found myself in that, kind of that fork in the road, where I could either keep doing what I've been doing for the last 28 years, or I could jump into what was really a newfound passion for me. And that's what I did. I took that leap. And I'll never forget the Tuesday that, my partner and I agreed on everything, and we're at a restaurant, and it's Tuesday afternoon, and I'm like, okay, don't have a job. And he says, so what are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm not really sure, and so I, met with somebody, and we ended up, jumping on, did some marketing. And I realized that at the beginning, in preparation for this, Brent, I don't want to admit it, but I'll admit it just to you. Don't tell your listeners. But I, at the beginning, would do anything pretty much that anybody asked me to do. And, people talk about when they start a business, how you should niche. And I'm not here to agree or disagree. It didn't work for me. And I just was like talking to people, and some people needed sales training. Some people needed, marketing help. Some people needed, team building experiences, whatever it was, I did whatever I felt comfortable. And that's how I started that whole piece.
Wow, that's I've heard a lot about the niching down, and I've preached it myself to people, but I want to say I actually think the niche that you had dialed in on was going to your network and saying, how can I continue to make your business better? And
Exactly.
it sounds like that was an aspect that you had been able to really work hard on between that 2008 and 2012. And so that was your skill set. So I would argue that
Right.
you hit the niche because you knew the folks who were open and ready to say, help me get better. And then you're like,
Right.
what can I bring to the table and serve? And I think that's
Right, absolutely. And the first two people, my first, I'm sitting there again with my ex-partner now after we had, made our arrangements. And he said, that's why after he said, what are you doing? And I said, I don't know. He said, well, I'd like to hire you for 3 days a week to be able to continue doing what you're doing. And oddly enough, my first client, I said, no, I can't do that, which made no sense to anybody. But I said, the reality is, my partner at the time, I said, you don't listen to me now. I mean, the whole reason that a lot of what I was leaving was because he wanted to stop the training because we had made it through that 2008 scenario. And we had really become, known for this training, and we started to grow it, and people were on a waiting list, and it was working out really well. So my first client was him. I said, no. My second client actually never paid me because he went bankrupt because it was already way too far gone by the time I got there. So I was 0 for 2, Brent, on my, on my hitting for the day. So I'm like, I'm really not the person, I guess, at that point. I was thinking, this isn't working. But, for people listening, you got to face your doubts, and you got to face your fears, and you got to dig down deep. And that's why I really encourage people that know yourself, so that you're able to say, I got this. Now, it's not going to always work out as you want it to. I have this, and I'm good enough that I'm going to be able to recover from this. So then from there, people started to hear that I was available. And then I just started to, work within my network, like you said, and the rest is history. So
talk to me a little bit about your prospecting process, if you would, because I have the luxury of, like I said previously, having met you when you were serving on the board where I was general
sure.
manager. And that was one piece that you came in to say, let's talk about prospecting and sales and those type of support. So walk us through, because you're starting from zero, but you're starting with a well-known reputation and a skill set that people understand and respect.
Right.
So how do you go out and find prospective customers in that market?
Yeah, I mean, low hanging fruit in my life and in anybody's life that's listening is you talk to people that you already know, that they know, like, and trust you. Those are really important people. And I think what's interesting is, if I don't necessarily have anything for you, but I may know somebody, I'm always encouraging people is make sure you ask, think about a referral, think about that kind of stuff. We do this all the time. And we say, hey, if you know anybody that could use sales training, Brent, let me know. And you're like, okay, yeah, sure. Thanks, man. And then, Brent walks along and he just goes back to his normal day. Well, if I change that up ever so slightly, a little course correction, and I say, hey, Brent, who do you know that could use sales training right now? And then I just sit there and shut my mouth and just wait for him to answer. Little course corrections like that are huge when it comes to prospecting, when it comes to networking. There's just these little nuances that you catch on sooner or later in your life. But eventually you're going to run out of friends, family, neighbors, and you're going to have to do something. So I personally, right now, I wrote an Amazon #1 best-selling book. And so I speak around the country, and that usually is a very solid way to, keep my funnel filled. I've identified that for every 40 people that I speak to, it was 30 2 years ago, but now with Zoom and a little bit different, it's moved up to about 40. Every time I speak to 40 people, I'm going to get a client out of that. Now, maybe they buy a book, maybe they buy a course, maybe they want some in-person training, whatever that looks like. But, I've identified that works for me. And now I'm at that spot, the great spot, that I don't have to knock on doors, because I have a list of people that are waiting. Once I have a slot open, they're waiting to take that slot. So it takes a while to get there, obviously, but when you have that thought process that you're going to make this work, it's way better, way more successful than just waking up every day going, okay, what am I going to do today? If you don't have your plan, That's why I called the book Growing on Purpose, was because I run into so many people growing by mistake. And I just wanted to get some intentionality behind that.
Oh, I think that's huge. My dad was a long time in sales, and he actually shared that 30 number. So it's interesting to know that for you that has increased a little bit. But
Yep.
whether it's 30 or whether it's 40, I want to remind people, I've seen a lot of folks get discouraged when it's like, I've made 2 or 3 phone calls and I'm getting some no's.
Yeah.
It was actually my experience when I first talked to you. And I think
Sure.
probably your feedback was, get a 0 behind that and make 30 or 40 phone calls. And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, but think about this too, though. I personally, Brent, I'd much rather get a no than I'll think it over or a no response. I mean, I love getting no's because number one, I'm that much closer to a yes, but also I don't have to clog up my funnel or my pipeline, my sales pipeline. I don't have to clog it up with stuff it's not going anywhere anyway. I mean, if somebody says, we're out of budget and we're looking at 22 budget and get back to me in, November, oh my gosh, that's totally cool. But when somebody's like, I'm not sure, because I'm selling something that's not tangible. I'm not selling copy paper. I'm trying to explain to people that you have 1 out of 3 of your people on your team are engaged in their job. So we can work on ways to get that into 2 out of 3 and maybe even 3 out of 3. But right now, the statistics show, from Gallup that 1 out of 3 people show up wanting to do their job. And so my part of my day is how can I increase that team? How can I build that team to make sure that they go to 2 out of 3? Well, if you don't know me and you don't trust me, I can tell you whatever I want. And, that's the problem with sales, is that there's so many people selling so many things that don't work. And so that's why, like, for me, I wrote my book because it adds credibility. I have my weekly podcast that adds credibility. So depending on what your listeners need to do to add credibility, that would be pretty high on my list, is right now find ways to be credible.
Oh, I love that. Building trust and credibility, I think, are 2 of the keys to selling. And I think you've said it slightly differently, but I think we're on the same page there. One piece,
Yep.
if I can accent what you just shared, I love the way
Sure.
you made that little twist, and you said, who do you know that needs help with sales today, and stop and pause.
Yep.
Versus, and so you're eliminating the option of, I don't know, well, sure, Dave, if I think of someone, I'll get back to you.
Right.
Because we all know that like about 1 in 1,000 happens on that one. But the
Exactly.
other part,
Yeah.
I would say, Dowdon, you didn't just say, do you know anyone else I can help? That's such
Yeah.
a big, wide term. You went right down to sales. Say anyone I can help
Right.
with sales, or whatever topic you wanted to push on.
Yeah,
Could be
absolutely.
engagement, right? But
Yeah,
you stop
absolutely.
and pause. So get specific. I'm about niching down again. Be specific, and then provide room to get it in the moment, because right now is when they have your attention. 5 minutes
Right.
from now, I'm don't
Yeah.
follow up email and all that. I got too many of those, and I love you, and I didn't mean not to get back to you, everyone, but that's just life. We just don't get back to
Right.
everyone. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like walking down the mall back when we used to walk down the mall, you have these guys in the kiosk, and man, if you catch their eyes and they're trying to sell you gutters, you're done. They're locked in, and we're so afraid of that communication. We're so afraid of that right now. So if there's trust built, like you said, Brent, if there's trust there, it's a lot higher likelihood of success, because I trust you. I think you have my best interest in mind. You're not going to try and take advantage of me. Everybody wants to hold their cards so close to their vest. No one wants to show anything. It's just such a different world that we live in. And I get it. I just choose not to follow it. So that's all.
no, it totally makes sense, Dave. How do you've got a lot, you mentioned some research that you're obviously following. The world has changed since 2008 when you started, and 13
Yeah.
into business here. How do you stay on top of your industry? How do you keep the research up and make sure that you're current with the trends and understand some of the underlying issues?
Sure. And that's a great question. For me personally, again, my DISC assessment says that I love to read, and I love to stay up on that. There are certain people that don't necessarily like to do that, and you might be one of them listening, and there's nothing wrong with it or right with it. I just am fortunate that I enjoy reading. It's interesting though, the flip side was I was reading like a book a month, and then I look back and I'm like, okay, I've done this now for how many ever months or years, whatever it was. And I look back and I said, okay, the last 3 books in the last 3 months, how much of that am I actually doing? And so I started to tone that down a little bit and spend more time, in trying to take that information and actually do something with it. Like we said, 1 in 3, Gallup's poll shows 1 in 3 people show up every day to their job ready to work, and they have 3 things on their mind. They want to improve themselves, they want to improve the company, and they want to improve the customer's experience. Well, what does that say about the other 2? What are they doing? And so when you really dig down, and most business owners that I talk to, they don't want to even receive this. I mean, this is Gallup national stuff. This isn't Dave Molenda making this up. Look at employee engagement for 2020 or 2019 or whatever year you want, and you'll look at these numbers, and it's just crazy. So how do you take that and actually help a business with that? That's what I'm so passionate about, making sure that people show up and they are all about the customer, and they're all about the company, and they're all about themselves. If you find that person, you latch on to them, and don't let them go regardless.
It makes me wonder, when you're saying this 1 in 3, I have to pause and wonder, since we're in the midst of some businesses really struggling to get people back on board, if some of those other 2 decided they're not going to come back because they were never really fully bought in,
Yeah,
playing in.
exactly. And if you're not plugged in like that, I mean, there are people that I've met, I don't know about you, but I'm sure you have the same stories about people that were actually excited because they didn't do anything today. I mean, it's like, that's like a little lapel pin that, oh, I did nothing today and I got paid for it, And again, I'm not here to judge or criticize. That's up to you. I just have a passion for that business owner that's paying that person and they're not doing anything. I mean, it's kind of like what are they called? Lifeguard, I mean, my gosh, they sit there and do nothing and get paid for it, but that's what they're supposed to do. I'm not thinking that, if you're supposed to be getting all this work done, lifeguard mentality is probably really healthy for you. So, but again, that's just me. I try really hard not to, be judge and jury for anybody else, but I do know that somebody's paying that person, and I just feel for that business owner.
Yeah, I'm with you. Tell me a little bit about your support system. What do you use to keep building Dave up, make you a better person, hold you accountable, and to make your business a better spot to succeed?
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I am involved in peer groups. I run some, I'm involved in others. I have strategic people set up for me that will help me on the accountability side. I am all about accountability for other people. So when I'm in a sales, I'm part-time sales manager for a couple companies, and we meet every week. And the goal is to bring accountability to the salespeople, because we all know, I've been in sales since I was probably 10 years old. And we know that without accountability, sales professionals tend to really struggle. Their numbers go down, their activities go down, their behaviors go down, and worst of all, their attitude goes down. And when you start to have that, we're in a society where we love to blame everybody but ourselves. And I've heard it's the government's fault, it's the weather, it's the competitor, it's the customer, it's the company. It's rare that somebody raises their hand and said, this is my fault, I didn't do this right. So I try to help that accountability piece and help those people along. So, but that was really a network of people is huge. I mean, boy, when we were on the same board together, years ago, there was accountability there. So we all find it, we all have it. We just have to make sure that we're, taking maximum use of that time.
Yeah, you bring up a good thought about accountability as it relates to salespeople. Shrink that down though to a smaller business profile, maybe just a solo business owner.
Sure.
They got to run most of the shop themselves. Give me a few ideas for our listeners here. How would you apply some of that accountability structure? We talked a little bit about the sales process and making some of those refinements, but how can you build accountability for yourself, if you will? Because
Yeah.
you don't know one to report to, it gets tough.
Yeah, for sure. The more hats you wear, the less likely you're going to be accountable to anybody. And that, quite frankly, is why coaches like you and I exist. I coach solopreneurs, if that's the right word, that they're out there by themselves and they're a one man or one woman show, and they need somebody to hold their feet to the fire because they're like me. They got out of corporate America because they didn't want somebody overlooking their shoulder, which is fine. The reality is you have more people looking over your shoulder in your customer, and you have all these competitors, you have all these people overlooking you anyway. So I like to come alongside people and help them with that. So the simple answer is find somebody in your life that can hold you accountable, preferably not a spouse, preferably not a family member, because it's really hard to ask the tough questions and have the tough conversations with family members and with a spouse, in my experience. So if other people have it different, great. I just know for me, when I ask a tough question to somebody and they didn't make a call, they didn't make a sale, they didn't follow through on something they were going to, it's real easy to kind of flush that under the rug. And it's, for whatever reason, Brent, Michael Jordan, two of my favorites, Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods, two guys that were fantastic at their skill. They needed coaches. They needed people to look at their swing, look at their shot, come alongside them and help them. So if those two guys needed it, probably safe that your listeners do, because I know I need it as well. So
No, that's fair, and I think that's a key part of. And even you mentioned sharing with a spouse or a family member. I find one of the challenges we have, because of the emotional entanglement. It's one of the reasons we have a hard time as coaches. Maybe you can relate to that. Physician, heal thyself.
yeah.
We can coach other people on what to do, but it's difficult to do for ourselves. And with the family arrangements, it's there. So do find that third party, those other folks who can build into you and give you suggestions and ideas. Dave,
Yeah.
talk a little bit. Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the funny thing is we all heard that the cobbler's kid had the worst shoes in the whole village, and that's so true. And rather than just give into that, that's where, again, find a peer group, find, a coach, find somebody that will come alongside you. It's just one of the best and smartest things that you can do for your business and for your customers.
Love it. Tell me a little bit about your brand. When people encounter positive polarity, what do you want them? What do you want your customers to come away with? That feeling and that kind of referral. What do you like to see there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, I remember that we were sitting around trying to come up with, me and a marketing firm were trying to come up with a business name. And I knew that I wanted to be positive because, most of us like positive people. And, when I talk to people and say, hey, let's do 10 tips to be more negative, nobody's really interested in that training, right? Because there's enough of that going on. And so I knew I wanted it to be positive, and I knew that I wanted it to be there, to be motion, there to be activity, there to be progress. And that's where polarity came through. So I think personally that people are thinking they don't want, if you're super negative and you don't want to change that negativity, I know I'm not a good fit for you. Now, if you're super negative and you have identified it, or other people have identified it in your life and you want to make that change, then obviously I'd love to hang out with you and talk more about it. But it's really about trying to move things forward in a positive manner. because there's opposing forces, and we have enough opposing forces on our business right now that we need all the help that we can get.
Awesome. Hey, Dave, if people want to get a hold of you, if they're interested in Positive Polarity, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, positivepolarity.com is the best website, and positivepolaritypodcast.com if you want to listen to the podcast. And I pretty much try and find that intersection between personal growth and business growth. That's where our podcast focuses. So if that resonates with you, jump over there. Don't listen to mine instead of Brent's. Okay. So listen to his first. His is definitely going to be where it's at for you. And then if you have an extra, 5 minutes and you want to come check us out, those are the two places to be.
Awesome. Dave Molenda, thanks for joining us today. Positive Polarity. You're gonna learn something. Even if you listen to his podcast, you just check him out some more. For the very first time I met Dave, like just the perspective and that focus on the positivity has been an aspect of his character that's come through. So thanks very much. So
Absolutely.
no problem. Hey, I want to again remind people October 26th, I want to see you there. We can do that on Zoom, or we can on LinkedIn Live, or you can come join us live at On the Bayou Restaurant. So do come. You're going to want to hear entrepreneur stories. People like Dave, there are folks who have made forward progress and have really made some aspects of success, but are still on the way in their business. If we're going to make it, you can't stay in your own silo. If one thing you've learned from Dave today, you got to have connections. You got to be able to network. You've got to leverage the network you have. So this is one of those opportunities. If you're looking for another, we're still here free through the month of October. Wednesdays, 4:30 p.m. Central. You can join us in Entrepreneur Encounters, where we're having groups of entrepreneurs just come together for 45 minutes to be able to get some of that accountability, to check in. We can have people workshop your problems. I'm there. There's a good handful of other entrepreneurs who are coming in on a regular basis because they know they want to get better and they want to grow their business to profitability. Well, we wouldn't make it without having a few sponsors, so I want to acknowledge them for today's show. Andrew Feller Photography has done all our photography both here and on our website. Buckethead Creative handles our graphics. Charlie's Music Factory and Chris Crane handle our music on the way out. And Milwaukee Web Designs has handled all of our web work. So again, Dave Molenda, thanks for joining. The founder of Positive Polarity. Do check out his podcast. I think you'll find it worthwhile. Again, I'm Brent Halfwasson. I'm an entrepreneur coach and a business catalyst. If I can help you grow your business to get that type of profitability you're looking for, do reach out to me, Brent@halfwasson.com. You can find me on my website, halfwassonassociates.com, or look me up on LinkedIn. I'm happy to work with you. So with that, let's ask Chris Crane to go ahead and take us out.